Hey guys, it's Terakuma here doing another take. Before I start, please know allergies have been kicking my ass the past few days, which is why this is taking a long time to get out and why the influx of the really weird Fluffle videos have been coming out, but I hope y'all are enjoying them. Thank you so much for all of the views, and I really hope y'all enjoy this deck profile. Also, please let me know if I'm going over everything like too fast or too slow. I really want to get into a groove of this, and any feedback is super appreciated. Okay, so getting into it, one of the videos was made with like a really weird grass list. Please don't play that. And and all of the other ones have really been made with this. First of all, the matchups, I just want to say the deck has a notably bad matchup against Eldritch, but that can be fixed by just putting more back row hate in, and please do that if you're going up against a lot of Eldritch. But I really feel like that is the deck's only real bad matchup, and every other deck, you pretty much just have a good matchup. A lot of decks aren't slated to do what they need to do to beat this deck because it doesn't really do anything that the other viable meta threats are doing. A lot of the decks right now seem to just be negate city and hand trap city. This deck is very good at playing through hand traps, and even though it doesn't set up negate, it sets up a lot of pops on your opponent's turn, and it sets up a lot of Scythe locks very consistently. So yeah, let's get started. Before I go into just all of the cards I want to explain, if you go first, you are normally aiming to set up a Scythe on your opponent's turn by summoning Cruel Whale with either a searchable hand trap or Necro Fusion, or if you're going second, you just want to pivot into an OTK all or nothing strategy where you normally set up Tiger plus Wolf to deal like 20,000 damage. So getting into the cards, we have two Fluffle Wings, and I'm going to go over this first and then Toy Vendor. So Fluffle Wings is like the draw engine of the deck, and you're playing two of it. If it's in your grave and you have a Toy Vendor, you could banish it and another Fluffle from the grave to draw a card, and then you can send the Toy Vendor to the graveyard to draw an additional card, and then Toy Vendor allows you to search. So Toy Vendors, once per turn you can discard a card to draw a card. Then if it's a Fluffle, you can special summon any monster from your hand. Notably, it doesn't have to be the one you drew, and you can just choose not to special and get the free draw as well. Otherwise, if it's not a Fluffle, you have to discard it. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to add either an Edgemp Sabers or a Fluffle monster from your deck to your hand. Notably, none of these effects are once per turn. And even though you can go full gotcha machine if you want and just like try and top deck dog, and a lot of times you honestly have to, even though a lot of the cards in this deck are very nice to draw off of it. You're pretty much trying to loop this card in the graveyard as many times as possible. It's not uncommon to get like 5 or 6. And I mean, who doesn't want 5 or 6 searches? But yeah, Fluffle Wings is the two of. It really is. It's just better Pot of Greed or better Engage, depending on how you want to look at it. Next up, one Fluffle Octopus. This is notably a level 1 for 1, and is your recycle engine. If it's normal or special, you get a Fluffle or Edgemp monster from your graveyard back into your hand, and that can just be the card you discarded off a 1 if you want to use it as like pure extension. And then if it's sent to the graveyard as a fusion material, you can target up to 2 of your banished monsters and put them back in the grave. This is really good because a lot of cards in this deck require you to banish, and you're playing a lot of 1-ofs. And your hand trap also bonuses as a banish from the graveyard to protect something. So it's very nice to recycle all of that. Next up, we have 2 Maxi because it helps you draw Edgemp Scythe. Maxi is the only hand trap I'm playing that's like a staple, I guess. If you want to up this to 3, go ahead, but I was really trying to get as close to 40 as possible, so you know I got that 41. I feel like the list is like super tight if you're trying to play it low, so it's just one of the first cards I cut. Notably though, it's very good in this deck because even if you know your opponent's turn is like over, and they're just like doing one special, it's worth it. This deck has so many 1 or 2 card starters that even just trading this for 1 card is so worth it's not even... Like, it's ridiculous how worth it is. It's... Oh hell yeah, I drew Dog off a Maxine and I won the game. That's pretty much what it is. Next up we have 1 Fluffle Sheep. Sheep is the extender of the deck. You're using this to either link climb or using it to recycle all of your edge imps. If you have a Fluffle monster, you can special summon it for free from your hand, and then you can return another Fluffle monster you control to the hand to special summon an edge imp monster from your hand or grave. So this is really good because a lot of the edge imp monsters have effects that happen when they get in the graveyard, and a lot of the Fluffles are hard ones per turns. So it lets you bounce it for next turn. This deck, like going first, it really is just a value engine more than anything. So the sheep bounce is a lot more like important than you would expect. And yeah, if you want to run more than one of this, feel free. But because of Toy Vendor and Dog and Bear and Penguin and Dolphin and Wings, you get to see it very consistently. Next up we have 1 Edge Imp Sabers. This is another card where if you want to run more than 1, go ahead. I feel like 1 is really risky, but I really like the line. If it's in your graveyard at all, you can place a card from your hand on top of your deck to special it. Notably, this allows you to stack your deck for Toy Vendor, but that's also the only thing on it. It doesn't restrict you at all. So you can either use it to link climb, just get it back so you can fuse it away, and it really doesn't feel like that much of a minus if you're using it to stack your deck. Next up, 3 Bear. Bear is by far the best Fluffle if you only see one of it. It's a hard once per turn on either effect, so watch out, and one of the effects is a lot better than the other. But they can both come out, or come up pretty hard. So the first one is the main effect. You could send it from your hand to the grave to set a Toy Vendor directly from your deck. And then that's just good. It allows you to pretty much just get any Toy Vendor off of a monster search, and it's a huge play starter just like that, because a lot of times this deck is just like, oh, I need to rip 1 Fluffle off of Toy Vendor and then I win the game. And then its second effect is you could tribute it to get a poly back from your grave. This effect actually comes up quite a bit, I would say more often than like you would expect, but it's literally all about the first effect. The second effect only really comes up in grind game, and it's one of the reasons why we're playing 3. And I feel like there's no reason not to, because you want to run as many Toy Vendors as possible. But yeah, that's Bear. Next up we have Scythe. This hand trap is notably searchable, and I think it is also the best hand trap in the game, but only Fluffles get it. During your opponent's main phase, you can reveal it, and then fusion summon a Frightfur using this card as material. And then if a Frightfur fusion monster would be destroyed, you could banish it from your grave. The first effect is ridiculous because it allows you to summon Cruel Whale, which then turns into a quick effect Scrap Dragon and a quick effect Foolish, and it's very good at popping your own artifact Scythe. Next up we have 3 Dog. Dog is the Stratos of the deck. It is a hard once per turn though, but it happens when it's normal or special. You get a Sabers or a Fluffle. I think I already said this in another take, but I don't know if I said this here. Edge Imp Sabers was the first Edge Imp monster printed, so a lot of Fluffles specify it. So it's like, even though Scythe and Chain, which is going to come up, are Edge Imps, a lot of them can only search Sabers. And you're going to want to use one of the searches especially to get it into rotation. Getting Sabers into rotation is super important, and that's what Dog normally does. But having just the Stratos whenever you need is super nice. Also, a thing about Fluffles is they're all notably fairies, so if you want to run any like weird fairy engine, feel free. Next up we have 2 Edge Imp Chain. Edge Imp Chain is by far the best one. It has 2 effects, and they both, it's like Bear where you only get 1 a turn. When it declares an attack, you can add an Edge Imp Chain from your deck to your hand. It feels like that would be screaming for you to run 3, but I really just like 2. because I feel like this first effect only comes up in like deep grind game, and it never really comes up enough to warrant it. And then its second effect is whenever it's sent from the hand or field to the grave, you can add a Fright for a card from your deck to your hand. This effect is absolutely busted because it allows you to add either a double Stratos, a Miracle Fusion, or a Pendulum monster that I will get into later. But yeah, you're normally using it to get the Miracle Fusion. It's just really good. You have no problem getting this card into rotation. And the second you do, it's just a big value engine. This effect searching is also very good because it makes it a free discard off of Toy Vendor even if you draw it off of it. Next up, 3 Penguin. Penguin is a 3 of because it's very good at chain blocking and it's very good at extending. Another thing about Fluffles, it's kind of like a high level play I've heard. But it's like chain blocking is when you deny your opponent the ability to hand trap because you're setting up a chain. This deck, every single card, like Octopus, Penguin, and Dolphin, have effects, and Chain if you want to do it like that, all have effects that happen when they're sent to the graveyard as a fusion material, or just sent to the graveyard. So if you ever do it, you're pretty much getting your fusions effect guaranteed because you're chain blocking it, and this is by far the best effect to use it with, and it's the first effect. During your main phase, you can special summon a Fluffle monster from your hand, and it can only be used once when it's face up on the field. This is not a hard once per turn, but it's very hard to use it more than once per turn. It's just good because this deck is very nice at like preserving the normal summon. It has a ton of ways to special that we haven't even gone over yet, but this effect comes up a lot. And then the second effect is when it's sent to the grave as a fusion material, you can draw 2 cards and then discard a card. As you've already seen with a lot of the cards, they really just want to be discarded, so it's not even a downside. And like I said, who doesn't like the free +1? Next up, we got Fluffled Dolphin. Dolphin is the best Fluffle, even though we're only playing 2 of it. No one negates this card, and if you ever are against Fluffles and have a hand trap and you don't know where the choke point is, it is probably Dolphin. Like, Dolphin will just get linked off if it's negated, but if you don't negate it, they will go like +4. You can target a Toy Vendor in your graveyard and set it, and then you can send a Fluffle or Edgemp Sabers from your deck to the graveyard. And then if it's sent to the graveyard as a fusion material, you get to recycle a Poly or a Fright for Fusion back into your deck. The reason why this effect is so good though is because it allows you to reset your Toy Vendor and then send Wings from your deck to the graveyard, instantly putting that into rotation, and then Wings is just +3. It's very, very strong. If you want to run a Foolish Burial Goods as well to get the Toy Vendor in the grave, so this can be a 1-card starter going first, just go ahead, or I guess a 1.5 card starter. Next up, 1 Scythe for combos that I will go over in a second, and then 1 Fright for Meister. Meister is one of the most broken cards ever, and I don't think anyone really knows about it. It doesn't make any sense. It just has some weird text on it. So, when it's in the Pendulum Zone, you contribute a level 4 or lower Fright for Fluffle or Edgemp monster to special summon from your deck 1 Fiend monster with a different name. If you want to abuse this and find like the weirdest level 4 Fiend to summon, go ahead. But right now, I'm using the targets where Bear can get me Scythe or Sabers, and Penguin, Dog, or Dolphin can get me Chain. Is the whole rotation of it. It also has a good effect as a monster zone, but it doesn't really come up as much. And then the Pendulum Zone effect also, it's like, it literally turns your whole deck into Lone Fire Blossom if it doesn't really seem like that good. just on read, but on play, it is ridiculous. It allows you to extend so much further than I feel like a lot of decks would really expect you to be able to extend it, and it causes a lot of misplays with hand traps. This deck doesn't really get worse if the opponent knows the matchup, but it's definitely a lot, like, it's a lot more explosive when the opponent doesn't know the matchup. You need to put a lot less effort into chewing through negates, because people like start negating stuff like Toy Vendor not knowing that it's like the Meister and stuff. Meister and Dolphin are the cards you have to negate. And then the on-field effect is during your main phase you can special summon a level 4 or lower Fright Fur, Fluffle, or Edgent monster from your deck. And then you can't summon any monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except for fusions. And then you contribute 2 or more fiends to special summon a Fright Fur fusion from your extra deck, and it's treated as a fusion summon. But the levels have to equal the combined original levels. This is a level 8, so it's very hard to like do anything with it. It's pretty much made so you have to use all of your other fiends and stuff. But when the deck, or when the card does come up, it's double chain pretty much for Kraken is when it would. It's just, you gotta use it if it comes up. Like, knowing that the cards have secondary effects that aren't as good as the primary ones are a big key to extending in this deck, and that's a big thing in all of the other videos I've made. So next up we have 2 Polys. Poly is a weird inclusion because a lot of cards are striving to be better Poly right now, and we also don't have Verte and Anaconda in the extra deck. But I feel like it just wasn't really needed. And Poly is technically a soft Garnet, which is why you're running 2, because of a card called Fright for Patchwork that I will just go over quick. So this is the best searcher in the game, but you might not want to ash it. If you ash it, it always feels good, but normally Fluffles have something dirtier. You get to add an Edgent monster and a Poly from your deck to your hand, and it's a hard once per turn. The Edgent monster you can add is notably Edgent Scythe, which is the hand trap, so that's the main reason why we're running 2 Polys. I want to get Scythe into rotation as much as possible, especially because Chain can search this. Next up we have 1 Reborn. It's just an extender. You can use it as a 1-card starter for a ton of stuff, or you can use it to revive a fusion monster if you'd like that was summoned properly. It's just a good card. I mean, I guess you could take it out and then the deck would be 40 because it definitely does the least, but I mean, it's just good. I really like it, honestly. Next up, 1 Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice is used as a secondary recycle engine along with Octopus. The big thing is Octopus can put stuff back in the grave, and then Pot of Avarice can put stuff back into the deck. I've thought about running 3 of this because of how easily this deck fills up the graveyard. The card Fright for Cruel Whale, which I showed off, that has the quick effect Scrap Dragon, also has a quick effect Foolish, which can Foolish stuff from your extra deck, which is the freest fuel for Pot of Avarice ever. And yeah, that's like the big one though, but before you try and make some weird Herald combos, it can only Foolish Fright Furs. But yeah, if you want to run 3 Avarice, go ahead. I mean, I really want to test it. It's just an SR, even though it's in the starter deck. But yeah, I just feel like it's a very good card. Next up, 1 for 1. I already talked about this with the Octopus, I think. It's, you use it to summon Octopus. Or Wings if you really need to get that into rotation, and that's about it. 2 Fright for Fusions. This is the Miracle Fusion. I would want to run 3 of it, but I'm only running 1 Sabers. If you run more than 1 Sabers, you probably want 3 of this. But I didn't want to brick, and it's searchable, and it's so searchable, I never struggle getting it, essentially. The Patchwork I already went over. And then next we have Repair. This is the foolish target for Cruel Whale, normally. You get to target a Fright for Fusion monster in your grave, and then shuffle it back into your deck, which is very good. And then you get to special summon a Fluffle or Edgent monster from your grave. So it's a monster reborn in that effect if you ever draw it. But if it's in your graveyard, you can banish it to special summon a Fluffle or Edgent monster from your hand. This is really good because Cruel Whale is normally going to get you a Foolish on your turn and on your opponent's. So just getting this out of the deck and opening up for that play is very strong. It's also a search off of Chain if you ever need it, if you're ever in a deep grind game. 3 Toy Vendor, I already went over this card. It's very good though. And yeah, like, I feel like some people have probably tried to be cheeky and run 2. Please run 3 of this card. It is actually just that good. Okay, 1 Twin Twisters. This is a reason why the Eldritch matchup is bad. I mean, it's literally all I'm playing. Is like the 1 Twin Twisters. If you want to run more, I mean, it's like I want to run Evenly Matched or something. Just anything that beats Eldritch, just put it in. I run the 1 Twin Twisters though because there is no side deck in Master Duel. So you have to run at least some hate, even though it's very high roll to just run 1. You can also use it to pop your own Scythe or your own Toy Vendor, so it's definitely good. Next up, 2 Necro Fusion. This is what I feel like sets apart Fluffles from everything else. It's not searchable, but with how much draw you're playing, it really feels like it is. You get to fusion summon 1 monster from your extra by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from your graveyard face down. If a card is like this, where it's Edgent Sabers plus 1 or more Fluffle monster, you can literally just banish like 10 cards for it and summon it on your opponent's turn. But a lot of them do list Sabers specifically, so watch out because you only have the 1, and if you're banishing it face down, that's all you get. You're normally summoning Cruel Whale off of this though, which is just 1 Edgem and 1 Fluffle, so it is a lot easier to get into rotation. Next up for the extra deck, we have 1 Bear. Bear is by far the worst card in the extra deck, and it's almost like unplayably bad, but it works very well specifically in the grind game. If you don't want to run this, I completely understand. But I mean, it's came up for me like quite a few times actually. It's like 4. I think it's came up like 4 times, so I mean, I'm happy running it. You need Sabers and Bear, and when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you can equip that monster to this card as an equip spell, and it gains 1000 attack. This is just really good at denying cards in the graveyard, even though it technically sends in the process of it. But if your opponent is running like super graveyard focused stuff, you can play this and then hit over a monster to really make your opponent feel bad. 1 Wolf. This was the first Fight for Fusion monster, and everyone thought it was bad because people were putting like Acts of Despair on this to try to make it OTK. It is a lot better than it was when Fluffles came out. It needs 1 Saber and 1 or more Fluffle monsters, and it has to be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials and can't be summoned in other ways. And it gets attacks equal to the amount of cards used to summon it. With 2k attack and a lot of ways to boost it in the extra deck, and this literally like represents like over 10,000 points of damage most of the time. So it's a pretty much just win on play type effect. And it's your main OTK tool. Like, I only run 1 because of Sabers, but I almost want to run 2 just because it's like, you need to get this card to OTK, it really feels like, against a lot of the opponent's stuff. Like, if a deck is like in the grind game, it's very easy at putting out like a ton of fodder, I've noticed. Just like every deck, like Drytron puts up a ton of bodies. Even if they don't have any negates left, it's like, there's a lot of shit on the board. Wolf can normally hit like 9 or 10 times, so it literally doesn't matter. Next up, 2 Tiger. This is the best card in the extra deck, I think. It takes Edgent Sabers and 1 or more Fluffles. When it's fusioned, you can target cards on the field up to the number of fusion materials used for its summon and destroy them. And then all Frightfur monsters you control gain 300 attack for every Fluffle and Frightfur you control. This is the craziest card like in the entire game, arguably, if you want to make that argument, because of its ability to pop 9 or 10 cards pretty consistently. If you use it even to pop like 6, for example, you're popping your opponent's entire board and your own Scythe, which is where it starts getting broken. I skipped over Scythe, but if you don't know what this card does, it's used in a lot of really degenerate combos and probably should be banned. But if it's special summoned during your opponent's turn, your opponent can't special summon any monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. And you can set it to your own side of the field as a spell or trap. So your mission normally going first is to get this card on your field and then pop it. And Tiger is one of the best ways to do that. Next up we got Chimera. This is another one of that I feel like a lot of people, it's like Bear in a way where it only comes up in the grind game, but I feel like you're almost required to run this card. It takes 3 Frightfur monsters, and notably, it has to be fusion summoned, can't be special summoned by other ways. But the 3 Frightfurs, it doesn't take Edgems, and it doesn't take Fluffles, is the big thing. This is like deep grind game, where you're just using everything, like you're Necro Fusioning all of your other fusions to summon this card. It has 2800 attack, and it has the Armades effect where your opponent can't respond when it attacks. If it destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, you get to special it on your field, but its attack is halved, and it gains 300 attack for every card controlled by you that's owned by your opponent, or every monster. So the big thing about this card is whenever you're playing it, it doesn't negate the effect. So like you can beat over something like really big, or like a one-sided floodgate effect like a Dark Law, for example. I don't know how you would summon this under Dark Law, but let's say that, for example, and then your opponent has to deal with Dark Law. It's very good against Invoked specifically. Like this card insta-wins Invoked. Next up, Frightfur Sabertooth. This is another one of, but it's a very strong card. It needs a Frightfur Fusion monster and then 1 Fluffle and or Edgent monsters. A lot of cards like this are very good because, I mean, they just don't take an Edgent monster if you don't want to. And the Edgent monsters are very, like, few and far between for playable ones. So it's like, you're pretty much just wanting to use the Fluffles every single time and save the Edgems for all of your other fusions. But when it's summoned, you get to target a Frightfur monster in your grave and special it. And then all Frightfurs gain 400 attack. If this card is fusion summoned with 3 or more materials, it can't be destroyed by battle or by card effects. This is a premier going first card, because if you make it with 3 materials and then just put it in defense, your opponent just can't really out it a lot of the time. And then notably, if you're making this with Poly and you have Cruel Whale or something, or you're making this just like after using Cruel Whale, you can still use you get an extra effect of the Foolish if you're resummoning stuff, so it's very good at recycling. Like you're literally just fusing a card off and then resummoning it instantly. So it's all value. Next up, 1 Kraken. Kraken and Cruel Whale, and I think Nightmare too, are like the new Fluffle boss monsters, where they are a lot less like specific. Like this takes 1 Edgem and 1 Fluffle. And it's a level 8. It's once per turn you can target a card your opponent controls, send it to the grave, or target a monster. That's very good. I mean, it doesn't destroy, and then it can't attack directly the turn you use that effect, but then notably, it can make a second attack during every battle phase, and if it battles, you can change it to defense, and it's a 3k defender. So it's just a very good card. It's very good at pushing damage. It's your main Sabertooth line, where you can make this, send a card to the grave, and then fuse it off for this, and then resummon it. And then this goes up to 26, and this is 28. So you're making 52-28, and that's an OTK. And now we have Cruel Whale. This is probably the best fusion monster. So if it's fusion summoned, you get to destroy a card on both players' field. This is almost always Artifact Scythe and or Toy Vendor. And then it's a once per turn quick effect Foolish on top, and then if you Foolish something, a fusion monster or a Frightfur monster. Wait, let me make sure. Yeah, it's any fusion monster you can Foolish or Frightfur to make it gain attack equal to half of its original. So like Cruel Whale will go up to 3,900 and you're getting a Foolish. It's just crazy upside. Next up is Nightmare. I feel like not a lot of people run this card, but I think it is absolutely busted. It takes an Edge Imp and 2 Fluffles. It gains 300 attack for each fairy and fiend in your grave, and every Fluffle is a fairy, and every Frightfur and Edge Imp is a fiend. But it only gains that attack up to your turn, on your turn, but it's going up to 4,500 very easily. If it destroys a monster by battle, you get to Foolish, Fluffles, and Fluffle, Frightfur, and Edge Imp monsters from your deck to the grave, equal to the level of it. And that's really abusable because what ends up happening is you destroy a level 4. I mean, that's a quadruple Foolish. You just win. That's so much value because that's getting... It's like, that's normally Wings, Chain, Dog, and like Dolphin, and then your whole deck is online. Or you can get rid of Meister if you want. And then the effect that is the best on it is when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets this card, you could banish a Frightfur monster from your extra deck and negate that effect. This effect is crazy, and it wins you the Sky Striker matchup specifically on the spot. This effect is not once per turn, or even once per chain, and you can definitely outvalue. Like, if you want, just pivot your game plan, dump all of these, and maybe keep a Cruel Whale or something. But yeah, this card is ridiculous. It also has 3k defense, so if you know you're going up against Sky Striker somehow, you could just make this in defense and win. Next up we have Dugaris. These are the two XYZs. We're running the one Dugaris because of its Monster Reborn effect, even though it makes you skip your next main phase 1. This really hasn't came up that much, honestly, but I know it's good, and there are times when I could have made it, but I've just like chosen other lines. It takes a lot of time specifically. One issue with this deck is even if you play kind of fast, it really seems like the time limit is just too strict even if you play fast. Like, if people let you draw off a Maxi and you have like 15 cards in your hand, I mean, you just don't have enough time to do your combos. That's actually happened on stream quite a few times. Speaking of, if you want to watch this live, Twitch TV/PMATG, it's pretty great. But yeah, Dugaris has the Monster Reborn effect, which is very nice. And yeah, you just use this and then link it off, basically. It's a very good card, and I would say you pretty much have to run it for when it does come up, because it's the only way you're going to beat some hand traps. But if you draw the nuts, it really doesn't matter. Next up, 1 VFD. This card is insta-win the game on play, and I'm very surprised it's even at 1. It's once per turn quick effect. You can detach a material and declare an attribute. All face-up monsters on the field become that attribute. Also, all monsters in your opponent's possession with that attribute can't attack or activate their effects. If decks are mono attribute, like Lightsworn for example, you just call Light and they insta-win the game. And you might be wondering, how do you make this? It's a rank 9. So Cruel Whale happens to be a level 9 for some reason. And you could do something just as simple as Poly, Frightfur Fusion. That's 2 Cruel Whales VFD. Is pretty much how it is. If you could ever make VFD, always do it. It's just very busted. Next up we have 1 Cross Sheep. This is another combo extension. If you make a fusion to a card it points to, you get to special summon a level 4 lower monster from your grave. And that's pretty much all it's used for. You just use it, get the Monster Reborn, and then link it off. Notably, linking with cards like Edge Imp Chain will give you the search because they can't miss timing. So it's like, yeah, you pretty much always just use this as an extender. 1 Artifact Dagda. This is also just two monsters with different names. So you get to use chain or whatever you want and then get to plus off of it. And then Dagda is good for two things. One, it's a chain block and a half. So you could use Dagda and then play a card like Fright for Fusion and chain block it, which is really nice. And then its effect lets you set an artifact card from your deck, which is always going to be Scythe. So you make this card going first to set up the Scythe lock, which is why you're only playing one. Or if you already draw it, you can just go into Cross Sheep instead. However, sometimes you actually get to go into both, which is pretty cool. And then one Boral Sword Dragon. Boral Sword Dragon is very good, because even though you probably haven't seen this card in a while, it still does exactly what it used to. It pumps out OTKs. It's a 3k monster that needs 3+ effect. Monsters you're normally link climbing into it, so it's not that bad, and it's a link 4. But 3000 attack is very nice. It can't be destroyed by battle. And then once per turn you get to target an attack position monster, change it to defense. And then this card gets to make a second effect, or a second attack during the battle phase. This is busted because it's on a quick effect, and it opens up a ton of stuff where you could even just put your own stuff into defense to hit for 3k more. And then your opponent can't do anything in response to this card's activation, so you could use it as a chain block and a half. And then once per turn when it declares an attack, you can make it gain attack equal to half of that monster's attack, and then have the opposing monster's attack. What this is normally used for, however, is the most common OTK in this deck is Fright for Tiger to pop your opponent's board, and then you link climb into Boral Sword. Fright for Tiger buffs itself to 2200, and then Boral Sword is 6k. So you just hit for 22, use the effect to make it go into defense, and then hit, and that's game. This has already been a super long take, and I'm really happy with it, even though I'm sorry if I sound kind of weird with allergies. I can't really go over combos, but I hope I've explained enough of the deck. Please let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed. See y'all next time.